Hello, friends. If you're curious about the movie Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, you're in the perfect place. Don't forget to give this video a quick like, it really helps us out. And if you're new here, hit subscribe to stay updated on all the latest movie deep dives. Let's jump right in. There's something unnerving about the silence of an empty pizzeria at midnight. The kind of silence that doesn't just sit in your ears, it breathes, lurks, waits. And if you listen closely, somewhere beyond the static-filled cameras and flickering lights, you can almost hear it, the soft scrape of metal feet across linoleum, the low whir of animatronic servos resetting themselves. The nightmare never really ended, it just rebooted. And with Five Nights at Freddy's 2, that nightmare evolves into something even more twisted. Directed by Tammi, returning after the cult success of the 2023 original, this sequel doesn't pick up where the first film left off in the traditional sense. It plunges deeper, dragging us back into the haunted innards of the Freddy Fazbear franchise. But this time, the shadows are longer, the secrets buried deeper, and the animatronics even less forgiving. Gone is the illusion that survival comes down to simply closing doors and checking monitors. This time, even your memories aren't safe. Set not long after the events of the first film, FNAF 2 takes us to a newly rebranded Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Shinier, brighter, more colorful on the surface, but with the same rotten soul humming underneath. The company has taken strides to modernize, to put the past behind it. They've brought in newer, sleeker animatronics with advanced facial recognition and voice mimicry. Security upgrades meant to ensure nothing like what happened before ever happens again. But in typical Fazbear fashion, those improvements only make things worse. We're introduced to our new protagonist, a soft-spoken but determined young night guard named Garrett, played by rising star Marcus Scribner. Garrett isn't new to danger. He's been drifting from job to job after a traumatic past incident left him with gaps in his memory and a growing sense that something is wrong with the world just beyond the veil. When he accepts the night shift at the revamped pizzeria, it feels like just another gig. Sit in a security booth. Watch the cameras. Survive until morning. But Freddy Fazbear's doesn't let things stay that simple. The first night begins deceptively quiet. Monitors flicker with empty rooms, party hats left scattered across tables, and the gentle mechanical chirps of idle animatronics. But then, one by one, things begin to shift. Chica's head tilts. Bonnie blinks. The new models, Toy Freddy, Toy Bonnie, Toy Chica, are supposed to stay on stage. Instead, they begin to wander. And unlike their predecessors, these aren't broken down with age. They're pristine, perfect, predatory. The core tension builds as Garrett realizes these new animatronics aren't malfunctioning, they're learning, studying, evolving with each night. They mimic sounds he hears in his own dreams. They call him by name, using voices from his childhood. And as the line between reality and hallucination begins to blur, Garrett stumbles across old security tapes hidden within the walls. Tapes that hint at a past far darker than a simple string of missing children. There's a masterstroke in the way this sequel blends lore with dread. It leans into the psychological horror that fans of the game series adore, but also retools it for cinematic storytelling. Every hallway in the pizzeria feels like a trap. Every moment spent watching static screens feels like borrowed time. And just when Garrett thinks he's starting to understand the rules, mask on, flashlight ready, keep the music box wound, the rules shift. The animatronics stop playing by the book. Enter the puppet. She doesn't rush. She glides. Her presence isn't announced with a jolt, but with a lullaby, one that Garrett begins to hum in his sleep. The puppet doesn't chase. She calls. And soon, Garrett begins to experience waking visions. Children with hollow eyes. Animatronic shells bleeding memories. A room, long sealed, with claw marks on the inside of the door. This isn't just a haunted building. It's a cursed loop. A ritual. And Garrett, it seems, has been pulled into it before. While the animatronics become more aggressive with each passing night, It's not just the new models that terrorize him. The old ones are still here too, malfunctioning, decayed versions of Freddy and his friends, hidden away like forgotten mistakes. They twitch. They crawl. They remember. And this is where the film shines, by weaponizing nostalgia. For fans of the games and the first film, the return of the original animatronics is like seeing a nightmare you thought you'd outgrown come crawling back, more broken and more terrifying. They don't just attack. They haunt. And in their presence, Garrett begins to recall things he shouldn't know. Fragments of a childhood birthday, a crying child in a yellow bear suit, a pair of golden eyes watching from a closet. Twists spiral inward instead of outward. Rather than expanding the story into some corporate conspiracy or branching timelines, FNAF 2 turns the spotlight inward, on trauma and memory and what it means to bury the past. Garrett isn't just a security guard. He's part of the story. Part of the curse. And the deeper he digs, the more he realizes that Fazbear Entertainment hasn't just been building animatronics, they've been building prisons. For souls. For stories. For people like him. The movie teases, and sometimes outright delivers, moments of shocking revelation. Who is Garrett, really? What happened to his brother? Why does he recognize the laughter that echoes through the party rooms at night? And what role does the mysterious phone guy play, now reduced to scrambled recordings that don't guide, but taunt? One of the most brilliant subversions comes in Night 4. Garrett finds a hidden passage behind the security office, one that leads not to a basement, but to a mirror of the pizzeria above. A second Freddy's. Inverted. Decayed. The walls are the same, but the posters are faded, the animatronics are missing parts, and in the center of the party room stands a birthday cake covered in mold. It's a memory brought to life. And the moment Garrett walks in, the power cuts out. No flashlight. No map. Just him, the puppet, and the sound of static dragging across the walls. Each night ratchets up the stakes. By Night 5, Garrett can no longer tell when he's dreaming. He wakes up outside the building. He finds messages scrawled in his own handwriting. Don't trust the children. She's watching. You were here before. And in the final hour, as everything collapses into chaos, the film delivers its most devastating reveal. Not with a jump scare, but with a home video. A tape from the past. A birthday party. A lost brother. And a yellow suit that was never meant to be worn. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 doesn't end in resolution. It ends in recursion. In the idea that the cycle isn't broken, it's just beginning again. Garrett's final moments leave us with more questions than answers, but that's by design. Because this story was never about escape. It was about reckoning. And somewhere, in the corner of a security camera feed, the puppet smiles. This sequel doesn't just expand the universe, it redefines it. It brings everything fans loved from the games, the mystery, the lore, the atmosphere, and translates it into something that breathes on the big screen. It's bigger, scarier, more intimate. And its scares don't come from volume or gore. They come from recognition. From the sick twist in your gut when you realize the animatronic isn't moving wrong. It's moving exactly like someone you used to know. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 isn't just a horror sequel. It's a mirror. A trap. And the scariest part? You've been here before. You just forgot. Until now. It starts the way so many horror stories do, not with a scream, but with a hush. The lights of the city fade into the distance, giving way to a dim, forgotten stretch of industrial edge where no one goes unless they have to. And Garrett, a quiet, cautious young man with tired eyes and too many unfinished memories, goes because he needs to. Desperation moves him forward, not curiosity. It's just a job. Just a few nights of surveillance work. He's been through worse, he tells himself. The building looms quietly at the end of the road. Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, reopened, redesigned, rebranded. The outside looks cheerful enough, all bright signage and pastel banners fluttering in the breeze. But even at a glance, something about the place feels off. It's not just the silence or the way the light flickers in the corner of the lot. It's the feeling in Garrett's gut as he unlocks the security entrance for the first time. As if he's not arriving for the first time at all, but returning. Inside, the pizzeria looks polished, clean. The floors shine too much. The colors are a little too bright. Animatronic mascots line the stage, frozen in poses of joy, their glassy eyes aimed forever forward. Toy Freddy. Toy Chica. Toy Bonnie. Glossy, updated versions of their predecessors, programmed with advanced AI and facial recognition software, designed to make the place feel more alive. But life, Garrett quickly learns, is exactly the problem. The first night feels like orientation more than horror. The security room is small and cluttered, filled with old monitors and a complicated layout of camera feeds, audio buttons, and system switches. Garrett settles in, flicking between static-filled views of empty party rooms and long, echoing hallways. There's a worn-down instruction manual on the desk, stained with age. Next to it, a dusty cassette recorder crackles to life. A man's voice plays, a distorted, weary version of the familiar phone guy from the first film. His voice warbles with time and interference. The message is less helpful this time. Less friendly. "Welcome back," the voice says. Garrett frowns. That wasn't part of the script. 4 hours, nothing happens. The lights flicker occasionally. A curtain ripples without wind. Somewhere in the dark, a music box plays a few soft notes before dying again. Garrett tries not to look at the puppets box too often. He doesn't know why, but it unsettles him more than the rest. At 3 a.m., the first movement comes. It's subtle, just a twitch on the camera feed. A slight turn of Toy Bonnie's head. Then another shift, this time from Toy Chica. By 3:30, both have vanished from the stage. Garrett's pulse spikes. He scans each room frantically, watching as the animatronics move in jerky, unnatural paths through the building. Always slow. Always deliberate. Always closer. He follows protocol. Mask on when they draw near. Lights when they stall. Don't leave the office. But already, something is different. The animatronics don't behave like the ones from the past. They don't just follow patterns. They watch. Garrett hears whispers through the monitor speakers, voices that mimic people from his past. A childhood friend. His mother. A voice he can't quite place, but that makes his spine go rigid. It says his name. Softly. Kindly. Garrett, come find me. He makes it through the first night with adrenaline humming in his veins and his palms slick with sweat. When the lights come back on, everything resets. The animatronics are back on stage. The camera feeds stop flickering. The music box winds down to nothing. Outside, the morning sun never looks so welcome. But Garrett doesn't quit. He comes back because something's been awoken in him. Something buried under layers of routine and trauma. The job is familiar. Too familiar. And each night, he finds himself remembering flashes. A birthday cake. Balloons. A camera flash. Someone crying behind a yellow bear mask. It's not a dream. It's memory. He's sure of it. Night 2 begins like the first. Calm, almost peaceful. But then, the toy animatronics start moving earlier. More aggressively. Freddy appears at the hall's edge by midnight. Balloon Boy giggles on the intercom without being seen. The puppets box winds down faster than it should. Garrett barely keeps up. At one point, he hears static that gives way to a new voice, this one warbled childlike, saying, "He remembers now." That same night, the power cuts for 10 full seconds. Just long enough for something to move without being seen. When the cameras return, one of the rooms is different. A poster of Freddy is torn. A door is slightly ajar, a door that leads to the maintenance hallway, long sealed in previous blueprints. Garrett's curiosity battles his instinct to survive. But as the week unfolds, the pull of the mystery wins. By night 3, the hallucinations begin. He hears laughter. Not the glitchy laughter of the animatronics, but real laughter, echoing from inside the building, even though he's alone. He sees children running across the hallways on the monitors, but when he checks the rooms, there's no one there. On the wall near the parts and service room, someone has scrawled, "It happened again." The new animatronics are no longer just wandering. They're hunting. Toy Freddy stares into the office even when Garrett wears the mask. Toy Chica speaks a word that cuts him deeper than any knife, "Brother." And when the camera flickers for too long, Garrett hears the creak of footsteps behind him, metallic, slow, waiting. But the biggest shift comes when he finds the box. In a forgotten room behind the arcade, tucked beneath a broken game cabinet, he finds a shoebox filled with tapes. Old VHS recordings labeled with names and dates. One of them has his own name. Another simply says, "Don't show him." He doesn't watch them. Not yet. But the room shakes as he pulls them free, as if the building itself resents the theft. Night 4 arrives like a storm. The animatronics no longer wait for the music box. They no longer follow their coded paths. They appear in rooms they were never programmed to enter. Garrett hears them whispering through the ventilation system. The walls sweat. The monitors bleed static. And when Garrett pulls out the tapes to hide them in his bag, the power surges, not off, but on, violently, in rooms he hadn't activated. A new figure appears on camera. It's not Toy Freddy. Not the puppet. It's withered golden Freddy. He doesn't move like the others. He doesn't flicker in and out. He just sits in a room that shouldn't exist, an off-map space filled with birthday streamers, forgotten balloons, and a dusty chair stained with time. Garrett stares at him for a full minute, unable to look away. Then, for the first time, Golden Freddy looks back. The screen goes black. And in that darkness, Garrett hears a voice, his own, younger, afraid. "I didn't mean to hurt him." When the lights return, Garrett is on the floor. The clock reads 6 a.m. He made it. But he's not okay. He leaves the building as the sun rises, but something follows him. A memory he can't shake. A face that's only just beginning to form. And that night, as he lies in bed, he watches the first of the VHS tapes. It shows a birthday party. Children laughing. Garrett, younger, happier. A boy with a striped shirt hugging a Freddy plushie. Then the camera glitches. And someone screams. The image freezes on a golden mask. His own voice echoes in his room. "I remember now." The next night, the 5th, is waiting for him. But it won't be like the others. Because Garrett isn't just here to survive anymore. He's here to remember what he was forced to forget. And Freddy's is not done with him yet. The sun doesn't rise the way it used to. Garrett stands outside the pizzeria just before dusk, the weight of the VHS tapes clutched in his hands like artifacts from another life. The building stares back at him, silent and still, but something about it feels different now, like it's waiting. Not just for the night to begin, but for him to return. He hesitates. The footage he watched the night before still plays on a loop in his mind. A birthday party. A missing brother. A scream. And that golden mask. Not just any mask. The same hollow staring face that appeared on his monitors the night before, unmoving yet all-seeing. The 5th night begins with no pretense of order. Gone are the sluggish security camera flickers and cautious animatronic footsteps. This time, the chaos is immediate. As Garrett enters the building, the lights pulse unnaturally. The animatronics are already awake. Already moving. The puppet's music box is unwinding without a sound. The halls feel longer than they should, bending like a nightmare, and the cameras glitch so often it's as if something doesn't want him to see anymore. This is no longer just about survival. It's about uncovering the truth. Back in the security room, Garrett inserts another tape. Static crackles. A distorted image appears. The same party room. This time, the children are gathered around a larger animatronic, one that's not listed in any Fazbear inventory. Golden Freddy. Silent, looming, unfamiliar to them but mesmerizing. The tape stutters just as a child disappears off-screen, and the rest scatter in confusion. Then comes a voice. Not from the tape, but from inside the building. "You let him go." Garrett spins. Nothing. But the voice sounded close, too close. The night unfolds like a puzzle unraveling into a trap. As Garrett tries to follow the animatronics on the monitors, he begins noticing inconsistencies. Doors that don't lead where they used to. Rooms flickering between states of past and present. The party room he knows from the map is now dressed in 1980s decor. Faded streamers. Balloons wilted with age. A birthday cake, untouched. Dust particles drift through the camera feed like ash. This isn't a simple haunting. It's a memory made physical. And Garrett is the only one who seems to be aware of it. Each hour becomes an escalation. The toy animatronics no longer follow the rules of distraction. Balloon Boy now appears in pairs. Toy Bonnie whispers secrets in voices that are not his own. Even the older animatronics, Withered Chica, Withered Freddy, and Foxy, begin appearing together, as if drawn by some invisible thread, converging not on the office, but on a sealed-off room in the West Wing. A room Garrett never noticed before. A room labeled simply as Spring Storage. When he makes his way there, violating every warning, every instinct, he finds what he didn't know he was looking for. The suit. The old, decaying Spring Bonnie suit stands in the center of the room like an altar. Discolored. Unhinged at the jaw. Bloodied at the seams. And surrounding it are drawings, childlike crayon sketches on the walls and floor, depicting birthday parties, crying children, and a boy wearing a party hat. Always standing alone. There's a new tape near the suit. Garrett plays it. This time, the image is clear. A man in a Fazbear uniform is coaxing a child into the back room. The child hesitates. The man kneels. The child nods. The door closes. The screen cuts to black. And that's when Garrett remembers. Not as a hallucination. As a fact, the boy wasn't a stranger. He was Garrett's brother. And that man, the one who smiled, who lured, who vanished, the man in the tape wasn't a stranger either. He was their father. The realization doesn't hit like a revelation. It sinks like a stone. Garrett stumbles back. The room sways. Everything he's seen, every whisper, every shadow, begins clicking into place. This job wasn't coincidence. It was return. The building called to him because it was made from his memories, his pain, his guilt, and now it wants something from him. As the clock nears 3 a.m., the building begins to deteriorate. Not literally, but visually. Hallways lose their dimensions. Doors open into voids. The animatronics twitch more violently, almost desperately. They aren't just haunting. They're trapped. Echoes of children's voices bounce off the walls, saying the same thing over and over. Help us. Find him. Finish it. Garrett races back to the security room, sifting through tapes like a man possessed. He finds the final one. The one that doesn't belong. It's unmarked. He hesitates, then presses play. What he sees changes everything. The footage is old. Grainy. Security cam angle. It shows Garrett, as a child, watching his brother's birthday party. Everyone is laughing. Except him. He sits alone, clutching a toy version of Freddy. Their father tries to coax him into the fun. He refuses. The father's expression darkens. He walks away with the younger brother. The feed cuts. The date in the corner reads a year Garrett had convinced himself never existed. In the background of that clip, barely visible, stands the puppet. Not watching the children. Watching him. Suddenly, Garrett understands what the puppet truly is. Not just an animatronic. A guardian. A memory keeper. And now, it wants Garrett to see what he refused to see all these years. That the darkness didn't just happen to him. It came from him, from the silence that followed, from the forgetting, from the abandonment of a younger sibling left alone in a place designed to consume. As 5 a.m. nears, the animatronics stop attacking. Instead, they gather at the main stage. Every single one. New and old. The puppet hovers near the curtains. Garrett, following a trail of flickering lights, finds himself drawn there too. The stage is set, just like in the tapes. But now there's one difference. A chair. Empty. Waiting. The puppet gestures silently. Garrett steps forward. And as he does, a final door opens behind the curtain, a corridor lined with images from the past. His family. His brother. The pizzeria as it once was. At the end of the hall, a mirror. He looks into it, and sees himself, but not as he is, as the child he used to be. And behind him, the golden mask. The climax doesn't come with screams or chase scenes. It comes with choice. The suit is waiting. The one his father wore. The one used to lure and destroy. Garrett can walk away. He knows this now. The cycle continues, always continues. Or he can end it. He looks back at the animatronics, who are no longer moving. Just watching. Waiting. And in their eyes, for the first time, he sees not malice, but hope. So he dons the suit. Not to become what his father was, but to face the past head-on. The gears lock. The lights flicker violently. The building trembles. Somewhere deep within, a scream, long and guttural, echoes across the halls. The animatronics bow their heads. The curse is breaking. Not because the evil has been destroyed, but because someone remembered. When the sun rises, the pizzeria is empty, not abandoned. At peace. Garrett is never found. But the tapes vanish. The animatronics are powered down. The walls no longer whisper. And in the final scene, we see a new child visiting the ruins, peeking through the fence, smiling at a rusted Freddy head lying in the grass. The child laughs. Somewhere, faintly, the puppet's lullaby plays once more, soft, almost like a lullaby for a nightmare finally ended. Or just beginning again. Garrett doesn't begin as a hero. He doesn't even begin as a protagonist in the conventional sense. He walks onto the screen not with confidence, but with weariness. His shoulders are hunched not just from exhaustion, but from something deeper, something internal, ancient, and buried. There's a shadow trailing him that isn't cast by the flickering fluorescence of the pizzeria's failing lights. It's the kind of weight that doesn't come from the outside world, but from memory. From guilt. From the start, Garrett feels out of place in his own life, like he's drifting through a world that never quite fits him. He's competent, yes, resourceful in a quiet, observant way, but there's a vacancy in his eyes, a delay in his reactions, like someone constantly trying to remember what they've forgotten. When he first accepts the night shift at the newly refurbished Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he treats it like any other job. A paycheck. Something temporary. But there's a flicker of familiarity in the way he scans the rooms, the way his fingers instinctively hover over the light switches, the security systems. It's muscle memory he can't explain. And that's the first key to Garrett's character. He's not discovering a story. He's rediscovering one. The true arc of his journey isn't about survival. It's about memory. Reclamation. The slow, horrifying realization that he is not just connected to the nightmare within these walls, he is woven into it. Garrett is marked by silence. He doesn't overshare. He doesn't panic easily. His reactions are often internalized, showing up in subtle facial expressions, in clenched jaws and flinched shoulders, in the way he stares a little too long at a screen that's just turned to static. And that's important. Because Garrett's trauma doesn't scream, it simmers. It's the kind that manifests in dreams, in flashbacks, in the haunting familiarity of things not quite remembered. His quietness makes him a perfect vehicle for dread. We don't just watch him experience fear, we absorb it through him. But as the nights progress, Garrett begins to shift. At first, it's subtle. He stops jumping at every noise. He tracks the animatronic's paths with focus instead of panic. He starts asking questions, not out loud, but in his behavior. In the way he returns to places he shouldn't. In the way he touches the walls like he's been there before. He's not just reacting anymore. He's searching. This shift is essential. It marks the midpoint in his transformation, from passive to active, from haunted to hunter. And it's not courage that fuels this change. It's a gnawing need to know, to understand. Because something inside him won't let go. And that something, we come to learn, is love. Specifically, the love for a brother he barely remembers, for a family fractured by silence and secrets. Garrett's relationship to his lost brother is the emotional core of the film, even though the brother never speaks, never appears fully on screen, and is remembered only through flickering VHS tapes and half-formed memories. But in those fragments lies everything. As Garrett peels back the layers of the pizzeria's twisted history, it becomes clear that this isn't just a ghost story. It's a confession. A reckoning. The animatronics aren't just monsters, they're echoes. Symbols of what was taken and what was forgotten. And Garrett, willingly or not, is here to answer for that forgetting. It's a subtle twist that redefines his character entirely. He isn't just a night guard trying to survive a week of terror. He's the survivor of a past tragedy that no one ever spoke about. A bystander to something that took his brother and left him with an aching void he tried to ignore. The horror isn't just around him. It's in him. And that makes his journey not just harrowing, but deeply human as Garrett begins to connect the dots. Through tapes, voices, twisted memories, he undergoes a slow unmasking. It's not just the animatronics whose faces are hiding something. Garrett himself wears a kind of emotional mask, one he doesn't even realize he's put on. His detached demeanor, his need to distance himself from others, his compulsion to isolate, all of it stems from a place of buried pain. And the pizzeria, in all its haunted, glitching malevolence, is the only place that forces him to take it off. His interactions with the animatronics evolve as well. At first, they're simply threats. Obstacles. Things to be avoided. But over time, Garrett begins to perceive them differently. Not as mindless machines, but as trapped souls. As warnings. They begin to mirror aspects of his psyche, the fractured, forgotten pieces of himself. The puppet, in particular, becomes a kind of twisted guardian figure. Watching. Guiding. Testing. She's not just there to kill, she's there to remind. And then, of course, there's Golden Freddy. Garrett's encounters with this figure are never loud. They're still. Golden Freddy doesn't charge. He waits. He watches. And Garrett, instinctively, reacts not with terror, but with recognition. Their connection is never fully verbalized, but it doesn't need to be. In the haunted world of FNAF 2, understanding comes in glances, in flickers, in the slow drop of a jaw and the quickening of breath. Golden Freddy is the mirror. The past. The thing Garrett has run from and is now forced to face. And when he does, when the final revelation hits and he realizes the truth about his brother, his father, and his own place in the horror, Garrett doesn't collapse. He chooses. That choice is the culmination of his character arc. He doesn't escape the pizzeria. He doesn't burn it down. He stays. Not out of weakness, but strength. Because to flee would be to forget again. To stay is to remember. To reckon. To break the cycle not with vengeance, but with responsibility. And in donning the suit, not the mask of a killer, but the skin of sacrifice, Garrett completes the transformation from haunted survivor to silent redeemer. The animatronics, too, are given character treatment rarely seen in horror films. They're not just set pieces. They're not one-dimensional monsters with jump scare timing. They evolve. They watch. They learn. And in a way, they mourn. Every malfunction, every glitch, every twitch of a hand or jerk of a head feels like a cry. They remember things the living have forgotten. And that pain seeps through every scene. Toy Freddy is the distorted reflection of corporate happiness, a smiling mask over mechanical menace. Toy Chica, with her voice mimicking voices from Garrett's past, becomes the sound of memory turned malevolent. Balloon Boy, at first a nuisance, becomes a symbol of the uncanny, something too human, yet not human at all. And the puppet, oh, the puppet! She is grief personified. Her movements are slow, deliberate. She never chases. She calls. Her lullaby isn't just a sound, it's a dirge, a plea. And when Garrett begins to hum it back, we know the bond has been sealed. Even the environment itself functions like a character, shifting, responding, shaping itself around Garrett's inner turmoil. The hallways elongate when he's lost. The rooms blur between timelines when he begins to remember. The entire building becomes an extension of his mind, his prison, his memory, and ultimately, his penance. In the final moments, when Garrett vanishes and the animatronics power down, we're left not with triumph, but with stillness. With a sense that something has ended, not the haunting, not the danger, but the forgetting. And that might be the most powerful thing of all. Because in the world of Freddy Fazbear, where the past is always one glitch away from roaring back to life, remembering is the only way forward. Garrett isn't the kind of hero who defeats evil. He's the kind who admits he was part of it, and in doing so, becomes something far more rare in horror stories. A man who chooses to stay in the dark so others don't have to. Somewhere between reality and a digital dreamscape, the production of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, unfolded not like a standard film set, but like a bizarre fusion of haunted house, tech experiment, and nostalgia-laced fever dream. It wasn't just a sequel. It was a resurrection. And from the moment the first slate clapped to the final sound mix, strange things began to echo through the production. Glitches, coincidences, callbacks, and moments so uncanny that even the crew started to wonder if Freddy's curse had bled off the screen and into real life. The strangeness began almost immediately, long before cameras rolled. The original Five Nights at Freddy's film in 2023 had surprised everyone by turning a low-budget, lore-dense video game adaptation into a horror phenomenon. The studio greenlit the sequel within weeks of the first film's success. But what surprised fans, and insiders alike, was how quickly production began. Writer-director Tammi had already been scribbling ideas on napkins during the press tour of the first film. She had no intention of simply upping the jump scares or throwing in more animatronics just for fan service. She wanted to go deeper, weirder, more intimate. And to do that, she insisted on one rule: no traditional sets. You read that right. Instead of building everything from scratch on a soundstage in LA or Vancouver, the production scouted a long-abandoned children's party venue on the outskirts of Portland. This place had everything: a decaying ball pit, collapsing arcade cabinets, peeling murals of forgotten mascots. It wasn't Freddy Fazbear's, but it might as well have been. It had the perfect texture, the right kind of eerie quiet. But here's the twist: the building had no working power when the crew arrived. And when they tried to wire it up, the lights would flicker only in certain rooms. The same rooms where key horror scenes would later take place. The electrical crew couldn't explain it. The building didn't respond to repairs like a normal structure. It had moods. During pre-production, strange technical issues plagued the editors and writers. Storyboards would go missing from the office whiteboards overnight. Sound recordings played back with faint static, even when the boom mics had been clear during recording. In one incident, a post-production team member reported hearing a child's laugh on an audio track, even though the scene had no actors under the age of 20. They scrubbed the audio repeatedly. The laugh remained. And then came the animatronics. Unlike the first film, which mixed CG and practical effects, FNAF 2 leaned harder into full animatronic puppeteering. Director Tammi partnered once again with the legendary Jim Henson's Creature Shop to build new, more advanced versions of the toy animatronics: Toy Freddy, Toy Chica, Toy Bonnie, and of course, the puppet. The challenge wasn't just making them move. It was making them emote. Each character was built with internal servo systems that could mimic facial movements and subtle head turns. The eyes alone had 22 points of articulation. The effect was chilling, even in daylight. During rehearsals, the animatronic heads were stored in a prop room clearly labeled "Do Not Open." Still, someone always did. And every time, the heads were in different positions. One time, Toy Freddy was found facing the door instead of the wall. Another time, the puppet's hands had moved onto its lap, something that required multiple steps and controllers to execute. No one claimed responsibility. Eventually, the crew stopped asking. Marcus Scribner, who played Garrett, admitted in interviews that shooting night scenes inside the retrofitted pizzeria was some of the most unsettling work he'd ever done. One particularly eerie moment came during the shoot for the VHS tape sequences. The footage was being filmed on old analog cameras for authenticity. When the tapes were played back on set, they were normal. But when played later in the editing bay, small, unexplainable images had appeared, blurs that looked like faces. A crew member named Alex eventually took a photo of one of the screens and posted it to their private Instagram with the caption, "He's in the frame again." The post was quickly deleted. The cast and crew developed a set ritual to keep the vibe light amidst the eerie atmosphere. Before each night shoot, they'd gather for a round of lullaby karaoke, singing songs from the game's soundtrack, often in creepy, exaggerated voices. But what began as a joke turned strange when one of the crew's Bluetooth speakers began playing the puppet's lullaby at full volume, without being connected to anything. It happened once. Then again. They stopped singing after that. But the VHS tapes are only one layer of the film's deeper message. The real thematic pulse beats in the hidden room, the spring storage corridor. It's not shown until the film is well into its second act. But once Garrett finds it, everything shifts. Critics lauded this scene for its restraint. There's no shrieking violin, no sudden jolt. Just silence. Dust motes drifting in filtered light. And in the center, the decaying spring Bonnie suit. It sits upright. Still. Like a forgotten king on a crumbling throne. It is a visual embodiment of guilt. Not just Garrett's guilt. Humanity's. This moment drew comparisons to films like Hereditary and The Shining. Stories where the true horror comes not from outside forces, but from within. Director Tammi uses stillness as a scalpel here. She doesn't shove horror at you. She reveals it, slowly, allowing dread to build in the quiet. It's no wonder that critics began discussing her as part of a new wave of empathic horror directors, filmmakers who prioritize emotional truth over cheap thrills. Another sequence that generated significant analysis is the Hall of Memories scene. As Garrett walks the corridor beyond the puppet's final gesture, the walls shift in and out of time. Birthday party decorations dissolve into grime. Balloons deflate in reverse. And the past and present merge into a liminal state where the narrative becomes a metaphor for grief. Garrett isn't just seeing these memories. He's being swallowed by them. The visual design here was praised for its ambition. Critics noted how the film borrowed the language of dream logic, echoing David Lynch's surrealism and Ari Aster's psychological layering, without ever becoming pretentious. It's a difficult balance, being visually poetic while narratively grounded. But FNAF 2 walks that line with eerie grace. The production design, camera movement, and color grading during this scene were all tailored to evoke emotional dissociation, making viewers feel as though they were slipping into Garrett's fractured psyche. And then there's Golden Freddy. His role, though minimal in dialogue, became one of the most analyzed aspects of the film. Academic essays began circulating online within weeks of the film's release, discussing him not as a character, but as a symbol of death, of regret, of cyclical memory. Golden Freddy doesn't act. He observes. And his silence is the loudest thing in the room. When Garrett looks into the mirror and sees his childhood self with Golden Freddy behind him, critics likened it to a visual articulation of inherited trauma. The sins of the father. The weight of being a survivor. One reviewer called it a confrontation not with evil, but with origin. Audience reactions mirrored this depth of discussion. Social media exploded with theories, interpretations, emotional breakdowns. One fan posted, "This isn't just a horror film. It's grief therapy with jump scares." And that's not far off. Because beneath the scares, the animatronics, the flickering lights, FNAF 2 is a film about memory, and how memory, when corrupted, can become a prison. The emotional climax, when Garrett dons the suit, divided some critics, but that division only fueled deeper analysis. Was this martyrdom? Was it penance? Was it escape? The ambiguity of Garrett's final act was a bold move, especially for a franchise that had previously relied on clear-cut survival tropes. But the film doesn't let us have that relief. Garrett doesn't win. He doesn't destroy the evil. He becomes part of it by choice. And that choice echoes in the silent expressions of the animatronics as they power down, not out of defeat, but out of release. That scene, static humming, lights dimming, the puppet tilting her head one final time, left critics stunned. The New York Times called it the quietest scream you'll ever hear. Collider described it as a slow, graceful decrescendo into madness. And fans? They just cried. Because Garrett's story is more than a horror plot. It's a metaphor for inherited guilt, for the silence in families, for the memories we bury until they come clawing back in the form of nightmares. But not all critical perspectives were praise. Some detractors felt the film leaned too heavily on ambiguity. They argued that the narrative didn't provide enough concrete answers, especially for casual viewers unfamiliar with the deep lore of the games. Others felt the slow pacing between jump scares broke the rhythm. Yet, even among these criticisms, there was respect for the film's ambition. Because even when FNAF 2 frustrated, it challenged. And that, in modern horror, is rare. One of the more unusual pieces of criticism came from a media psychologist, who praised the film not for its plot or visuals, but for its effect on dream patterns. Yes, actual dreams. Viewers reported vivid dreams after watching. Some reported sleep paralysis. Others experienced recurring dreams of forgotten childhood homes, of faces without names. The critics' theory? The film's nonlinear structure and use of liminal imagery activated parts of the subconscious usually dormant during passive viewing. In other words, the film didn't just stick with people. It rewired them. The emotional resonance of FNAF 2 also lies in how it reframes the animatronics. They're not just killing machines. They're vessels. They carry sorrow. When they stare into the camera, they're not looking at Garrett. They're looking at you. And for just a moment, you see them as more than monsters. You see them as children lost in a loop, remembering, reliving, never escaping. It's a theme that hit hard for fans who've grown up with the games. Because they, too, grew up. And this film asked them, what have you forgotten? This introspective turn sparked renewed interest in the franchise's deeper lore. Forums lit up with reinterpretations of the original timeline. Theories shifted. Characters were re-examined. Suddenly, FNAF wasn't just a game about jump scares. It was a gothic family tragedy. And FNAF 2 became its elegy. Ultimately, what critics and audiences responded to most was the film's emotional sincerity. It could have gone big, louder, bloodier, but instead it went deeper. Into grief, into memory, into the parts of ourselves we're too scared to face. It didn't just ask, "Can you survive the night?" It asked, "Can you survive your own past?" And as Garrett's final image fades into static, his story unresolved, his fate uncertain, we're left not with fear but with silence. The kind that comes after a scream. The kind that lingers. The story of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, didn't start in a boardroom. It didn't start in a slick pitch meeting or on the set of a multi-million-dollar franchise sequel. It began somewhere quieter, somewhere darker. It began in the hum of an old VHS tape player, in the creaking echoes of a forgotten party room, in director Tammi's obsession with nostalgia and decay. After the unexpected success of the 2023 FNAF film, the studio was eager to strike while the iron was hot. But Tammi didn't want to deliver a mere follow-up. She wanted a transformation. Not just more jump scares, not just more animatronics, but something richer. Something haunted in more ways than one. And so she went back to the source material, not just to adapt it, but to feel it. Her earliest notes weren't outlines. They were dreams. Real dreams. She kept a sleep journal throughout the final weeks of editing on the first film. After the unexpected success of the 2023 FNAF film, the studio was eager to strike while the iron was hot. But Tammi didn't want to deliver a mere follow-up. She wanted a transformation. Not just more jump scares, not just more animatronics, but something richer. Something haunted in more ways than one. And so she went back to the source material, not just to adapt it, but to feel it. Her earliest notes weren't outlines. They were dreams. Real dreams. She kept a sleep journal throughout the final weeks of editing on the first film, jotting down fragments of imagery that visited her at night. One recurring theme stuck with her, a child standing in front of an unplugged television, waiting for something to play. That image became the seed that grew into FNAF 2's VHS subplot. Not because it was scary, but because it was familiar. The decision to build the film around memory and trauma, rather than escalation, shaped every creative decision. Tammi chose not to return to a studio soundstage. Instead, she scouted real, deteriorating locations, abandoned roller rinks, shuttered pizza parlors, empty arcades from the 1980s. One of the locations they eventually settled on was a defunct birthday party venue in rural Oregon. The carpeting was rotted. The lights flickered. The animatronic mounts had long since been removed, but their bolts still stuck out of the walls like metal bones. "We didn't need to dress the set," production designer Chloe Barnard said. "The ghosts had already been there." It wasn't just a stylistic choice. It became a living environment. The smell of old grease and melted plastic clung to the air. The walls were damp with age. Every door creaked just right. And perhaps most importantly, it felt liminal. Like a memory more than a place. Filming in a real location, however, brought its own challenges. The crew couldn't control the sound environment the way they could on a soundstage. Nearby train tracks shook the building every hour. Mice were a regular presence. Power outages weren't just part of the script, they were part of the schedule. At one point, the lighting rig blew out mid-shot, plunging the entire cast and crew into near-total darkness. They stayed quiet, hoping it was just a fuse. Then the puppet's head turned. Everyone froze. The puppeteers swore it wasn't them. It was the first of many moments when reality and fiction began to blur. The animatronics themselves were a feat of practical ingenuity. Once again, Jim Henson's Creature Shop returned to bring life, or unlife, to the characters. But this time, the request was more complicated. We wanted them to feel new, clean, and yet completely wrong, Tammi explained. Not monsters. Mirrors. Each toy animatronic had its own servo system designed to mimic real-time emotional shifts. Toy Bonnie's eyes could track the actor across a room. Toy Chica's jaw was calibrated to close just slightly when a line of dialogue was delivered nearby. We wanted it to feel like they were listening, said effects supervisor Ruben Sykes. But not responding. Just remembering. The puppet was the hardest to build. It required 3 puppeteers working in tandem, all of them in complete sync, controlling the arms, neck, and fingers through a combination of rods and wireless signals. During one scene, the operators claimed the arms moved before they gave the signal. "It's like she already knew what we were going to do," one of them said. The voice work was another layer of complexity. Instead of using typical voice actors, Tammi decided to blend synthetic voices with the cast's own distorted speech. Marcus Scribner, who played Garrett, recorded all his lines twice, once straight and once whispered, off-mic, as if speaking to himself. These whispers were later layered into the ambient audio throughout the film. You hear him in places where he doesn't speak, breathing in scenes he's not in. It wasn't an accident. The editing process was just as unconventional. Lead editor Vanessa Klein worked with hours of footage that had no traditional structure. Tammi insisted on shooting scenes out of order, using overlapping timelines and multiple takes with subtle changes to performance. Klein was given permission to build the film like a memory, not a sequence. It was like making a dream. You had to feel your way through it. One of the strangest parts of the production was the shooting of the VHS tapes. Rather than use digital filters to mimic old footage, the crew tracked down functioning VHS camcorders from the late 80s. The scenes were filmed in real time, onto actual cassettes. And it wasn't just about texture, it was about authenticity. But here's where things got strange. 2 of the tapes came back with extra frames. Seconds of footage that hadn't been shot. A chair rocking by itself. A hallway where no scene had been filmed. No one could explain it. They were left in. The crew developed their own rituals to cope with the atmosphere. One of the most popular was Mask Check, a daily moment where each animatronic head was inspected for any changes. On 4 separate occasions, someone reported seeing a head turn slightly off-center, always toward the security office set. "We started keeping them in sealed crates," said Chloe Barnard. Didn't help. Even the score became a character. Composers the Newton brothers used broken music boxes, slowed down nursery rhymes, and reversed field recordings to build the soundtrack. During mixing, one of the loops refused to sync properly, until they played it backward. What they heard was a child's voice saying, "Let me go." They don't know where it came from. Director of photography Owen McMahon developed a new camera rig that mimicked the movement of security cameras, mounted on rails that could pan, tilt, and glitch in real time. During shooting, some of these rigs would randomly rotate, without prompting, especially when near the puppet's box. We thought it was interference. We isolated the signal. Still happened. But perhaps the most telling moment of the shoot came on the final day of production. It was Garrett's final scene, the corridor of memories. The crew had prepared the set meticulously. Aged posters, flickering lights, fog machines humming gently. But as the cameras rolled, the fog machine cut out. The power dimmed. And the light behind the mirror, placed as a metaphor, glowed brighter than it had during any test. And Marcus, in character, walked into it without needing direction. He stopped. He looked into the mirror. And he said, unprompted, "I remember." The take was silent. No one breathed. And when Tammi called cut, no one moved for a full 10 seconds. They all knew. That was the one. There were lighter moments, too. Balloon Boy was a constant source of chaos on set. The puppet, which was remote-controlled, had a tendency to drift, literally. During one rehearsal, it wheeled itself into the hallway mid-scene, earning a full-on jump from one of the sound techs. "We weren't even filming that night," he laughed. "I nearly quit anyway." The rap party was held at the same abandoned party venue, now fully restored for one night, with neon lights, arcade machines, and a DJ spinning retro tracks. Everyone wore Fazbear masks. Halfway through the night, someone realized no one had invited the man in the golden Freddy costume. He never took off the head. He never spoke. And when the lights came back up, he was gone. Of the past. Of the things we let stay broken. And the production, in all its beautiful chaos, captured that perfectly. From the creak of old doors to the smile of a forgotten mascot, from whispered lines to silent stares, the film wasn't just made. It was unearthed. And every frame bears the dust of where it came from. There's something inherently haunted about places built for joy and long abandoned. A pizzeria with decaying carpet, faded balloons still clinging to the ceiling, rusting animatronic stages once meant for laughter but now settled under layers of dust and silence. This is where Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, lives. Not just narratively, but emotionally. The setting isn't just a location in this film. It's the heartbeat. The coffin. The cradle of memory where all things fester and return. From its first frame, the film makes it clear, this version of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza is not the same cheerful ruin you remember. It's a ghost of itself, rebuilt atop its own ashes. The newly rebranded location, supposedly meant to restore trust and reintroduce the brand in a bright, family-friendly way, has all the visual trappings of a corporate makeover. LED signage glows just a little too cold. Plastic surfaces shine with a sterile gleam. The walls are coated in a fresh palette of pastel blues and pinks that feel like they were chosen by an algorithm, not a human hand. But underneath, it's rotting. Director Tammi and production designer Chloe Barnard didn't create a fantasy horror space, they dug one up. Much of the film was shot in a real, abandoned children's party venue, and that authenticity bleeds through every frame. The peeling paint, water-damaged ceilings, and clattering ventilation systems aren't set decorations, they're the bones of the building itself. And the decision to use that space, to let it breathe and crumble and hum on its own, adds a kind of uneasy realism you can't fake. You feel it the moment Garrett, our protagonist, walks through the employee entrance. There's no music, no flashing lights, just the groan of an old door, the flick of fluorescent lighting stuttering into life, and the low electrical buzz that never quite goes away. The office, where he will spend so much of his time, is cramped and claustrophobic, filled with old monitors, analog switches, and a desk that looks like it's been wiped down one too many times but never really cleaned. Everything is too still. And that stillness becomes a character of its own. Throughout the film, the setting evolves not through physical changes, but through psychological ones. What begins as a run-down, neglected venue slowly twists into a place suspended between dimensions, part present, part memory, part hallucination. The layout of the building remains the same, but what each room means shifts with Garrett's descent into his own past. The main party room, for example, starts as a vacant space with overturned chairs and dusty streamers. By the midpoint of the film, that same room flickers with images of children's parties long gone, balloons that float for a second too long, and tablecloths that seem to rustle even when no one walks by. The hallway lighting changes as the nights progress, not always obviously, but in tone. Subtle grading shifts take place that lower the temperature by a few degrees of color. On night 1, the security camera feeds are washed with blue-white light. By night 4, they lean toward a faint, sickly green, creating the sense that something in the building is beginning to rot from within. The film doesn't just show you the setting, it lets you decay with it. Cinematographer Owen McMahon developed a unique visual language for the film that blends security footage aesthetics with intimate handheld shots, placing the viewer both in Garrett's body and on the other side of the screen watching him. Cameras are mounted in corners, elevated in hallways, or set behind dusty glass panes that create distortion and drag. Many of the film's scariest moments aren't jump scares at all, but slow zooms. Quiet creeping shots that let the corners of the frame darken just enough to make you wonder what's hiding there. This voyeuristic quality is intentional. You are not just watching Garrett, you are watching with him, surveilling spaces that surveil back. The camera frequently lingers on empty rooms for longer than necessary. Not because something is about to happen, but because something might. That uncertainty builds into a rhythm, a kind of dread-laced heartbeat that guides the film's pacing. Lighting plays an enormous role in shaping the story's tone. The entire film is shrouded in a kind of artificial twilight. No true darkness, just endless shadow. Even when Garrett uses his flashlight, the beam doesn't cut cleanly through the air. It bends. It warps. It reveals too much and not enough. Practical lighting rigs were designed to flicker irregularly, using randomized timers that ensured even the crew didn't know when a hallway would plunge into dimness. That unpredictability leaks into every moment, making each step down a corridor feel like a descent into something alive. And then there's the sound of the setting. Every room hums. Every vent groans. Even when the animatronics are still, the building breathes. The production team used field recordings of real decaying infrastructure, pipes bursting, wind moaning through cracked tile, rats skittering in ceiling beams, and layered them into the background noise so subtly that most viewers never consciously hear them. But their bodies do. The discomfort becomes somatic. You don't just see Freddy's. You feel it in your bones. As Garrett begins to uncover the tapes and encounter the deeper hauntings of the building, the setting itself begins to reflect his fractured state. The layout of the pizzeria becomes fluid. Hallways shift. Rooms repeat themselves. One particularly disorienting moment involves Garrett walking into the arcade, turning, and finding himself back in the security office without ever opening another door. No one speaks about it. No musical cue signals it. It just happens. The architecture of the space has become untethered from logic, like Garrett's memories. This surreal transformation of setting reaches its peak during the Hall of Memories sequence. As Garrett is pulled deeper into the heart of the building, he enters a long hallway lined with decaying birthday posters, water-stained tiles, and blinking party lights that flicker in rhythm with a music box we never see. The corridor stretches beyond natural proportions. The camera tracks with him, not from in front, but from above, like an old security drone floating silently behind him. Set dressing in this scene is painfully specific. Broken crayons, a forgotten shoe, melted ice cream staining a corner. None of it is explained. All of it is felt. These aren't props, they're echoes. The hallway isn't just a physical space. It's Garrett's guilt, laid out in architecture. Then comes the room with the chair. A single chair, in the center of a birthday setup frozen in time. Streamers droop from the ceiling. The air is thick with dust that seems to fall upward, not down. The lighting is impossibly warm, golden like a home video. This room is not scary in the way horror rooms usually are. It's sad, beautiful, mournful. The kind of sadness that's too deep for words. The kind of scene that tells you the story has never been about monsters. It's about what we leave behind, and what refuses to stay buried. Throughout the film, animatronics aren't just placed in the environment, they inhabit it. Everyone froze. They checked the programming logs. No such voice line had been loaded. They tried to replicate it. They couldn't. After that, Toy Bonnie was nicknamed the Prophet. Despite the occasional terror, the crew kept the energy light. Between takes, they invented a game called Mask or No Mask, where someone would hide behind a wall or curtain in one of the animatronic heads, and the cast had to guess which character it was based only on movement. It sounds silly, but in a place where even the props sometimes moved on their own, it was harder than you'd think. Marcus was the reigning champion, until the day someone in a spring Bonnie head stepped into the office set, stared at the monitors for a full minute, and walked away in total silence. No one claimed credit. They stopped playing the game after that. The crew faced their share of non-supernatural challenges, too. The building had no working plumbing. The power grid was patchy at best. Rainstorms leaked through the roof, creating a minor flood in the hallway where the puppet scenes were meant to be filmed. But rather than panic, Tammi leaned into it. She red-blocked the scenes to incorporate the ankle-deep water, letting it reflect the red emergency lights and shimmer beneath the puppet's slow, gliding movements. It became one of the most chilling sequences in the film. Sound design also came with its own hurdles. Because of the building's echo-heavy construction, every footstep had to be recorded in a custom sound booth later, using layers of concrete, linoleum, and old carpet samples to recreate the exact texture. Foley artist Dana Reeves joked that she felt like she was building a haunted floor sampler. One night, while recording ambient sounds, she picked up what she thought was interference, soft, breathy humming. But when she isolated the track, it was a perfect loop of the puppet's lullaby, even though no music had been played on set that night. She still keeps that file on a locked hard drive. Post-production became its own fever dream. Tammi worked closely with editor Vanessa Klein to shape the story not through linear scenes, but emotional momentum. Some of the most iconic transitions in the film, the looping hallway, the seamless shifts between memory and reality, were born in the editing room. Emma told me, "I don't want it to feel like watching a film. I want it to feel like remembering a nightmare," Klein recalled. So we broke the rules. A lot. That included using intentionally broken footage. Several scenes were filmed on VHS camcorders and left uncorrected. Scratches, glitches, dropped frames, all of it stayed. In one frame, they noticed a strange blur in the background. When zoomed in, it looked like someone wearing a party hat. No actor had been in the shot. No party hats had been used that day. They left it in. The cast, meanwhile, bonded over their own shared unease. Between shooting schedules, they'd gather in the parking lot and tell ghost stories, some true, some fabricated. Marcus became the unofficial leader of night talks, encouraging the crew to process what they were making. "This isn't just a movie," he once said. "It's a place we've all been, even if we didn't know it." Crew members speak of the shoot like a fever dream. Exhausting, yes. Challenging. Sometimes terrifying. But unforgettable. Costume designer Raina Patel remembers staying up all night stitching tears in the puppet suit that kept reopening. "It was like the fabric didn't want to hold," she said. "As if the seams were trying to speak." Even after wrap, the building didn't let go easily. Several crew members reported strange dreams in the weeks that followed. Always the same place. Always the same flickering hallway. One PA said she dreamed of the security office's monitors turning on, one by one, and showing footage of her childhood birthday parties. Footage she swore had never been filmed. One final story made the rounds after the wrap party. It was held in a local community center, bright and cheerful, far away from the set. At midnight, the lights flickered. A joke, everyone assumed. Until one of the techs noticed something odd in the corner. A balloon. Yellow. Slowly rising. No one had brought balloons. There was no wind. And when they popped it, confetti spilled out, shaped like tiny silver eyes. No one knew what to say. They laughed. Nervously. And then they all went home. Because even if you love Freddy Fazbear's, even if you believe in the power of story and memory and facing your fears, you never really want to know what's watching when the cameras stop. That's the magic and the madness of FNAF 2 behind the scenes. Not a set. Not a script. A haunting. And every person who walked through those doors came out carrying just a little piece of it. Still flickering. Still humming. Still waiting to be remembered. It begins with silence. Not the silence of a quiet room or an empty hallway, but the deeper kind. The kind of silence that exists when someone stops asking questions. When a memory is buried. When a secret settles like dust in the corners of a mind that refuses to visit certain places anymore. That silence is the real antagonist of Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025. More than the animatronics, more than the pizzeria, more than any flickering camera or malfunctioning light. And it is from that silence that the film's deepest themes begin to speak. At first glance, FNAF 2 seems to be about fear. The fear of the dark. The fear of being hunted. The fear of machines that look too much like us, but move just wrong enough to remind us they're not. But that's just the surface. Beneath the jump scares and the retro animatronics, the film is quietly and persistently about memory. And not just the act of remembering, but the unbearable weight of what we choose to forget. Garrett, the film's central figure, is more than a night guard. He is a cipher. A memory in search of itself. When he first steps into the newly reopened Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, he doesn't come across as frightened or curious. He comes across as disconnected. This disconnection becomes one of the film's foundational symbols. He is a man without a tether, floating in his own life, unaware that the very place he's entered isn't just haunted by ghosts of the past, it's his past. In this way, the pizzeria becomes a powerful symbol for the subconscious mind. It's not just a setting, it's a labyrinth. A shifting, decaying archive of moments too painful to look at directly. The flickering hallways, the locked doors, the rooms that shouldn't exist, they're not architectural errors. They're psychological barriers. Memories stuffed in boxes and pushed to the back of a closet. Until they push back. Throughout the film, animatronics aren't just placed in the environment, they inhabit it. Toy Freddy appears beneath a flickering disco ball, his shadow stuttering across the wall. Toy Chica peers from behind the service counter, framed by an arched doorway designed to resemble a clown's mouth. Each one is visually composed within the setting to emphasize unnatural stillness. They're always partially hidden, never fully center frame until it's too late. The puppet, especially, is filmed like a painting. Framed within her music box, lit from beneath, her mask as blank as the dreams she guards. Set designers intentionally left subtle details throughout the pizzeria that reflect Garrett's past. A balloon with his childhood nickname scrawled faintly across it. A scratched-out birthday card tucked into a corner wall. Viewers might never consciously notice them. But Garrett does. He pauses, stares, falters. These touches aren't Easter eggs. They're breadcrumbs. Reminders that this place remembers him, even if he doesn't remember it. In contrast, the security office remains untouched by this emotional bleed, cold, clean, mechanical. It's the one place Garrett tries to stay grounded. But even here, the setting betrays him. The monitors become less reliable. The audio glitches. One by one, even his screens begin showing reflections instead of footage. By night 5, the cameras stop showing the pizzeria entirely. They show him. The final setting, spring storage, is where the film delivers its emotional coup de grace. This room, shrouded in heavy plastic, dimly lit by failing fluorescence, is where the spring Bonnie suit waits. The walls are covered in condensation. The floor is slick. There's no music here. No hum. No sound at all. The silence is deafening. It's a void in the architecture. A space that never wanted to be found. And as Garrett steps into it, the color grading drops into near monochrome. Everything becomes blue and gray. The only warmth is the faint glow of the suit's yellowing fur. It's not a climax. It's a confession. Every visual choice in FNAF 2 was made to guide us to this room. Every hallway bent our sense of reality. Every camera angle whispered secrets. Every light flicker reminded us, this place isn't haunted because something evil happened here. It's haunted because something forgotten happened here. And the building remembers. That's the genius of the film's setting and cinematic elements. They're not decorations. They're not window dressing for a spooky story. They're the soul of the story. The pizzeria doesn't just house fear, It creates it. It's alive, not in the animatronic sense, but in the way memories are alive. Lingering. Breathing. Decaying in corners where the light doesn't reach. In the final shot, after Garrett disappears, the camera lingers one last time on the main party room. The lights are off. The animatronics are still. And just before the screen fades to black, one of the balloons, deflated and forgotten, rises slightly into the air. No wind. No reason. Just a breath from a place that's not done remembering. Somewhere between the first flicker of light on a security monitor and the slow, uncanny tilt of an animatronic head, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, was born. Not in a pristine Hollywood studio, but in the shadows of real, abandoned spaces, stitched together by a crew that didn't just make a movie. They survived one. What emerged wasn't just a horror sequel. It was a strange, beautiful, nerve-wracking production experience that left nearly everyone involved with stories they'd never forget, and some they refused to tell with the lights off. It started, as most things do, with a decision. Tammi, fresh off the success of the first film, wasn't interested in repeating the formula. She didn't want to just up the body count or throw in a few new jump scares for cheap thrills. She wanted to build a story that felt deeper, darker, and more emotionally rooted. To do that, she knew the setting had to be real. So rather than create a polished set on a controlled stage, she and production designer Chloe Barnard sought out locations that were already halfway to decay. They found it in Oregon, tucked between a shut-down strip mall and a forgotten stretch of freeway, a children's party venue closed since 1998. A place once filled with laughter and cheap pizza, now overtaken by dust, spiders, and the eerie echo of silence that only buildings with memory can carry. From the very first location scout, something felt off. Not in the Hollywood, let's hype up the ghost stories way, but in the quiet, unsettled feeling among the crew. They called it the sigh. Every time someone stepped into the main party room, they would feel it, a slow, low exhale. No wind. No HVAC. Just a breath. Like the building was watching, and didn't approve. At first, it was a joke. The ghosts just welcoming us, someone laughed. But by the second week of pre-production, no one laughed about it anymore. Especially not the lighting tech who swore he saw an animatronic walk past the kitchen doorway 2 days before the puppet rigs had even arrived. Despite these eerie coincidences, the energy on set was anything but grim. The cast and crew, a close-knit team of returners from the first film and newcomers hungry to make something unique, developed a strange camaraderie. Marcus Scribner, who played Garrett, quickly became the grounding presence on set. Every morning, he brought iced coffees for the crew. Every night, he'd walk the perimeter of the building, alone, claiming he needed to feel the fear to sell it. He also became the unofficial tour guide for new team members, leading them through the maze-like hallways of the abandoned building by flashlight and giving half-true stories of Fazbear lore. Sometimes he made stuff up just to see if we'd believe it, said Vanessa Klein, the film's editor, who visited the set frequently. Like the time he said there was a sealed room full of balloons that never deflated. I still don't know if that was real. Scribner wasn't alone in his immersive approach. The animatronic puppeteers from Jim Henson's Creature Shop became known as the Ghost Crew. Dressed in black, moving silently through the shadows to operate the creatures, they blended so perfectly into the eerie atmosphere that several background actors genuinely mistook them for extras in costume. One puppeteer, operating Toy Freddy, once scared a PA so badly during a lighting test that he dropped his walkie and sprinted outside without looking back. That wasn't in the script, Tammi joked later. But we kept the reaction. The animatronic rigs themselves were a marvel of engineering, and a constant source of unpredictable chaos. Each was built with servo-driven facial expressions, moving eyes, and programmable voice modules. But sometimes, they didn't behave. One night, during a quiet rehearsal, Toy Bonnie activated without being triggered. It raised its hand, pointed directly at Marcus, and said, in a garbled version of his own voice, "Garrett, you forgot again." As Garrett is drawn deeper into the pizzeria's interior, he begins experiencing not just hauntings, but echoes. Rooms change shape. Posters revert to old designs. Birthday decorations reappear after being cleared. The animatronics don't merely attack, they watch, follow, remember. This reversal is key. The machines are not mindless threats. They are witnesses. They carry the memories Garrett has tried to abandon. They speak in voices that are not theirs, his mother's, his brother's, even his own as a child. One of the most potent symbols in the film is the VHS tape. We see Garrett find them one by one, scattered through the building like breadcrumbs. He plays them, not just to learn about the history of Freddy's, but to see himself. A younger version, caught in unfiltered moments of childhood. At first, the footage is innocent, birthdays, laughter, family. But gradually, the tapes darken. The camera lingers too long on the wrong face. A party ends with someone crying in a corner. A hand reaches out of frame. Something unspoken happens just beyond the lens. The tapes represent the core of the film's thematic tension, the way trauma embeds itself in memory. They are pieces of a puzzle Garrett doesn't want to solve, and yet is inexorably drawn toward. Watching them is painful. Not because of what's shown, but because of what isn't. Because the real horror is absence. The absence of a brother. The absence of protection. The absence of answers. And as Garrett watches, the pizzeria responds. The building reshapes itself. Time fractures. Events repeat. Garrett becomes unstuck, not in reality, but in narrative. And this is where FNAF2 introduces one of its most nuanced themes, the cyclical nature of grief. Nothing in the film moves in a straight line. The nights repeat. The routines fail. The rules stop working. The animatronics don't follow patterns. They evolve. They adapt to Garrett. They begin to echo his guilt. Toy Freddy begins to mimic Garrett's voice. Toy Chica speaks in riddles that reference his childhood. The puppet, the most enigmatic presence in the film, never chases, but always lingers, as if waiting for him to stop running. To face her. To listen. The puppet herself becomes one of the most rich symbolic figures in the film. Representing grief incarnate, she is neither antagonist nor ally. She is memory, embodied. Her music box, the mechanical lullaby that must be kept wound, is one of the most striking metaphors in the entire film. If it stops, she emerges. Not to kill. To remind. She is the ticking clock of unprocessed sorrow. The idea that, no matter how tightly we wind our lives, grief always finds its own rhythm. That's why Garrett hums the lullaby in his sleep. It's not because he's haunted. It's because he's remembering. And that act of remembering is where the film's most emotionally resonant theme takes shape, responsibility. FNAF2 is not a story of good versus evil. It's a story of complicity, of silence, of what happens when we turn away. The animatronics were not born evil. They were designed for joy. What they became, what they had to become, was a response to a world that didn't listen, a company that erased, a family that forgot. The film never says directly what happened to Garrett's brother, but it shows us enough. The golden suit, the back room, the man who smiles too easily, the birthday that ended with screams and sirens. The event wasn't just tragic. It was hidden. And Garrett's choice, to forget, to flee, to build a life untouched by that moment, becomes the very engine of his torment. That's what makes the ending so powerful. When Garrett chooses not to run, but to stay, to enter the final hallway, to face the suit, it is not a heroic act in the traditional sense. It is an act of accountability, a surrender, not to evil, but to truth. He puts on the suit not to defeat the horror, but to wear it, to feel its weight, to be part of what he once denied. And in doing so, he releases the animatronics from their cycle. not with violence, but with memory. Golden Freddy, perhaps the most iconic symbol in the franchise, takes on new meaning here. He is no longer a harbinger of doom. He is the Watcher, the Mirror, the version of Garrett that could have been, the boy who didn't get out, the one who never grew up, the one who waited silently for his brother to come back and say something, anything. But no one ever did. The mirror scene between Garrett and Golden Freddy is one of the most quietly devastating moments in horror cinema. Not because of fear, but because of recognition. Garrett sees himself, his younger self, his forgotten self, and behind him, always, that silent, golden face. Even the building participates in the symbolism. The flickering lights, the looping hallways, the rotting walls, they're not just set design. They're metaphors for Garrett's psyche. The security room, with its buzzing monitors and static-laced audio, represents his illusion of control. The further he ventures from it, the more vulnerable he becomes. And the closer he gets to the truth. Colors shift with theme as well. The early parts of the film are washed in cool tones, blue, white, steel gray. But as the nights progress and Garrett's memories resurface, reds begin to emerge. Not loud, not violent. Soft reds. Birthday red. Balloon red. Cake icing red. By the final act, the entire palette has turned warm. Sepia, gold, amber, like an old photograph left out in the sun. Memory made visible. There's even symbolism in the jump scares. Traditionally used as startle tactics, they're redefined here. Each one isn't just about timing. It's about revelation. The animatronics don't burst in randomly. They appear when Garrett is close to something he doesn't want to know. They are not punishing him. They are trying to stop him from going deeper, from uncovering the wound that can't be rebandaged once revealed. And in that way, FNAF 2 becomes a tragedy more than a horror film. A story about how we carry grief, how we bury it, and how it never, ever stays buried. Critics called the film psychological horror in animatronic clothing. But that's only half true. The animatronics are the psychology. They represent different facets of trauma. Toy Bonnie, the sense of being followed by the past. Toy Chica, the manipulation of childhood innocence. Balloon Boy, the mocking echo of a voice no longer innocent. And the puppet, the final stage. The grief that cannot be killed, only faced. And Garrett, in the end, doesn't defeat them. He joins them, not in death, but in memory, in acknowledgement. In the final moments, the animatronics stop moving, not because the danger is gone, but because the silence is finally broken. And in that silence is peace. Five Nights at Freddy's 2 isn't about monsters. It's about the monsters we create when we refuse to see each other. When we choose forgetting over forgiveness. When we silence a scream by turning down the volume, instead of asking why it began. It's a film built on symbols. On music boxes that unwind. On masks that don't protect. On doors that don't lock out the past. And in every hallway, in every dark corner of Freddy's, there is not just fear. There is grief. And in its final frames, there is something even more haunting. Hope. It doesn't take long for the film to crawl beneath your skin. Even in its opening minutes, Five Nights at Freddy's 2, 2025, doesn't waste time with grand spectacle or overt declarations. It simply starts, quietly, methodically, like the turning of a key in a forgotten lock. The screen flickers. The image hums. A hallway stretches too far. A balloon sways without wind. And before you realize it, you're not just watching the film. You're inside it. That seamless immersion, so subtle, so unrelenting, was no accident. It was the result of a carefully curated symphony of filmmaking techniques, each one chosen not for style alone, but for emotional impact. Because in FNAF 2, Horror isn't delivered in punches. It bleeds slowly, leaking from light sources, from audio glitches, from corners of the screen that never seem to sit still. The entire movie operates like a breathing memory, and its tools are as eerie as the story they serve. Let's begin with the camera. Cinematographer Owen McMahon approached the film like he was building a surveillance system, not a narrative. The camera's presence is ghost-like, disconnected, watchful, always one room away. For large stretches of the film, scenes are shot as though through mounted security cams, locked angles mimicking the in-game experience. These static perspectives force the viewer into the mindset of Garrett, our protagonist. You're not in control. You're observing. And the longer you observe, the more the dread builds, not because something is happening, but because something might. But McMahon knew when to break the rules. At key emotional beats, Garrett discovering the first VHS tape or entering the spring storage room, the camera slips its fixed position. It moves with human breath, following him handheld, creeping through the shadows as if we're no longer watching with him, but through him. This shift is subtle, but deeply effective. It signals a change. Garrett is no longer a night guard trying to survive. He's a man remembering. And memory doesn't have locked angles. It drifts, warps, returns. In a particularly striking sequence during Night 4, the camera tracks Garrett as he stumbles down a hallway that loops onto itself. McMahon used a motion-controlled rig on a rotating track, but the effect is simple and unnerving. The background resets, identical to the last, but Garrett keeps walking. The visual language here is unmistakable, trauma looping like a tape, time losing its grip, space refusing to obey. You feel it in your gut, something's not right, and the camera makes sure you never forget it. Editing, handled by Vanessa Klein, was equally surgical. Rather than adhering to traditional continuity, Klein cut the film like a nightmare. Transitions aren't always logical. They're emotional. A hallway turns into a bedroom. A blinking light becomes a flickering candle. Garrett nods off in the office and wakes up somewhere he doesn't recognize. These cuts mirror his fractured psyche, reinforcing the film's central theme. Memory is not linear. It spirals. It haunts. One of the most daring editing decisions came in how time was portrayed. Each night in the film technically runs from midnight to 6 a.m., mirroring the game. But you'd never know it from the way time is shown. Klein intentionally skipped forward or looped back, creating uncertainty. In one scene, Garrett checks a wall clock. It reads 3:17. 10 minutes later, he sees it again, unchanged. These moments are subtle, but they disorient the viewer, creating a sensation that nothing is real and everything might be repeating. But it wasn't just visual manipulation that shaped the atmosphere. Sound played just as vital a role, and in some cases more. Composer duo the Newton Brothers returned to score the sequel, but this time they threw out traditional instruments. Instead, they recorded ambient noise from the actual filming location, ventilation systems, dripping pipes, the whir of malfunctioning light fixtures, and wove it into the soundtrack. What resulted wasn't music in the conventional sense, but texture. A sonic environment that whispered, groaned, and scratched at the edges of each scene. One of the most chilling techniques used involved reversed lullabies. To create the puppets theme, the composers took classic children's melodies and reversed them, then played them through broken cassette decks. The result was a sound that didn't just feel uncanny, it remembered. As if the song itself had been played too many times and was starting to deteriorate. Dialogue, too, was treated unusually. Many of Garrett's lines were recorded with double takes. One normal, one whispered, and one as though being spoken in a dream. These layers were often blended so faintly into the background audio that they functioned as subconscious cues. In several scenes, you hear him breathing, mumbling, or repeating phrases, but only if you listen closely. These aren't hallucinations. They're internal monologues given life through sound. Even silence was weaponized. There are entire sequences where no music plays. No dialogue. Just ambient hum and the soft creak of old structures settling. But in that silence, your ears begin to pick up everything. The ticking of Garrett's watch, the faint shuffling of something not quite in frame, the clicking of a broken animatronic jaw. Sound in FNAF2 doesn't support the fear. It is the fear. Another layer of technique lay in the lighting design. Practical lights were used throughout the film. Fluorescent tubes, red emergency strobes, flickering LEDs, the kind of lighting you'd find in real buildings, not movie sets. But the twist was in how these lights were programmed. Many were connected to randomized timers, meaning even the crew didn't know when they would fail or flicker. That uncertainty bled into the performances. Actors flinched for real. Timing was disrupted. But that's exactly what Tammi wanted. Fear isn't rehearsed, she said. It's unexpected. And speaking of performance, filming techniques also shaped how the actors interacted with the space. Tammi shot many scenes in long, continuous takes. No resets. No second angles. Just Garrett, walking through the dark, waiting for something to appear. Often, Marcus Scribner wouldn't be told when or if an animatronic would enter a room. The reactions you see, his confusion, his hesitation, are real. The tension wasn't just in the script. It was on set. One scene in particular, Garrett finding the final VHS tape, was shot in near-total darkness. The only light came from the monitor playing the tape. The production used infrared cameras to capture the scene, adding an ethereal glow that made Garrett look ghostly himself. The symbolism here is potent. He's not watching the tape. The tape is watching him. And behind all of this meticulous craftsmanship was the practical reality of turning a haunting into a box office success.